Danger by Design is another one of the Nancy Drew games that everyone else seems to love, but I'm not a big fan of it. The setting is great and it's got a lot of characters, which is good, but I don't like the characters and I think the story is a bit of a mess. It feels like two unrelated stories were thrown together. The first half of the game is about Minette. The second half is Nancy going on a big scavenger hunt to find artwork. The two stories don't overlap, and there's a sloppy ending which does a bad job of tying everything up. Still, this game is a masterpiece compared to the game that came after it, and it's definitely just as good as many of the previous games, even if I personally don't care for it. This game introduces Nancy's desk. It starts with a brief scene of Nancy going to her desk, giving a lecture about everything that's there. The only way to skip the lecture is by clicking on the plane ticket. I don't like the long, unskippable lecture, but other than that, I like Nancy's desk. It's a good premise. It's going to be at the start of every Nancy Drew game from now until game 26. It's going to be at the start of every Nancy Drew game from now to game 26. There's a scrapbook, which is basically ads for the previous games. The How to Be a Detective book is an updated tutorial, which is nice. I never do the tutorials, but it's good to have them. The desk usually has small references to previous games, like a carousel horse. The important thing on the desk is the case file, which explains Nancy's going to Paris. She's working undercover as an intern for Minette, an erratic fashion designer. Nancy's supposed to figure out if Minette is too unstable to be worth funding, and yes, she is. The case file says Nancy took 2 years of French in high school. That's a lie. Nancy knows absolutely zero French in this game, until the ending, when she suddenly translates a long letter flawlessly. I wish the game was more consistent about her French skills, but that's a minor complaint, because really, I thought translating words from French into English was a decent puzzle. We get it twice in this game. Nancy arrives in France just in time to see Minette scream and throw a plant against the wall. Heather runs away to escape Minette. Apparently, wild temper tantrums are one of Minette's anger management techniques. I don't understand that. You know what would help your anger problem? Getting as angry as possible. Then Minette cries and laughs. It's all very strange. It definitely sets up the premise that Minette is weird, and she might attack you at any minute. The airline lost all of Nancy's luggage. Luckily, Nancy is staying with a model named Ling, who has plenty of extra clothes we never get to see. Heather's an okay character. She seems unnaturally tall, and her outfit is hideous, especially for someone who works as a fashion designer. Heather's somewhat nice. She's nicer than anyone else in this game, but she does have a vaguely sarcastic side when it comes to Minette. I don't know. I want to like Heather. I feel like she's a good person, but I also feel like she would be an annoying co-worker in real life. Both Heather and Minette mention that Minette is designing a fancy dress for the First Lady. Nancy notes that it's made of an interesting shimmering material. A gold star goes to anyone who guessed right away spies are using the dress as a bug. In an exact repeat of Secret of the Scarlet Hand, Nancy's desk has a list of chores to do, which former intern Sonny June never finished. He left behind a notebook with silly pictures and clues that I never understood. The one is clearly directions, but to what? It doesn't match the dodo puzzle or the swimming challenge. The other is D6, E6, D6? Is that music or something? I don't know. Is there an explanation for these clues, or was somebody at Her Interactive just messing with players, giving them an impossible puzzle? I understand Sonny's clue about the different plotter settings. You want to copy his first picture by setting the plotter to 1, 2, 1. That fixes the plotter. It's one of the few Nancy Drew puzzles that you can easily solve on the first try. Nancy's other chores force her to meet the other various characters. Dieter von Schwesterkrank is a photographer. I don't like Dieter. He's kind of a jerk. He starts off by interrupting you and guessing you're a lost American tourist, then guessing you're only here because you think he's going to make you a model. So the first introduction to Dieter is a bad one. He makes mean assumptions about you for no reason. I don't like his design either. He has a heavy forehead, which makes him look angry all the time. I do like his jacket. That's pretty rad. Dieter says you have to print pictures because he's too busy doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. He uses special Krollmeister paper which follows very specific, complicated rules. Players are forced to memorize the rules because Dieter's a jerk and refuses to let you take the rules into the dark room. I don't like the dark room puzzle, which isn't a big surprise because everyone dislikes this puzzle. You have to do the puzzle in complete darkness. The screen is totally black. If you click on the wrong area, the chemicals explode and you have to start over again. That's unforgiving. I would have made the challenge very dark, but not completely dark. You need to put a picture in 4 different things. The enlarger for 2 to 9 seconds, tray 1 for 7 to 12 seconds, tray 2 for less than 5 seconds, tray 3 for 8 to 15 seconds. So you're not only memorizing the locations, you're also memorizing the timing. The instructions for the enlarger and the trays are on different pages of the binder. I would have gotten rid of the enlarger part and just done the 3 trays. It's easier to only have to worry about 1 page of the binder. And of course, I'd also recommend having an easier junior detective variation of the puzzle. Luckily, there is a cheat. You can flush the toilet many times in a row, and the puzzle is skipped. I usually do that. I think I do that all the time, actually. I don't like that puzzle. Nancy talks to Dieter. He claims he and Jean-Mi are enemies because he refuses to give Jean-Mi special treatment like everyone else does. Jean-Mi will say he dislikes Dieter because Dieter is arrogant. I don't think the game follows up on this. Jean-Mi and Dieter claim they dislike each other, then they never talk about each other again. I don't know why the game set up a rivalry between them, only to ignore it. That's another problem I have with this game. The characters don't interact enough. Last game, you could get Tino to start dating Lori, and Fatima, she wanted Charlena's autograph. The characters cared about each other. In this game, the characters mostly ignore each other. You can sometimes get them to talk about each other, like Jean-Mi will talk about JJ, but JJ won't talk about him. Besides for Heather and Minette working in the same building, the characters are too separated for me to really think they're all part of the same mystery. It's less, here are the most suspicious people, and more, here are random people who know Minette. Dieter says Heather has a crush on him, but he pretends not to notice. She'll get over it eventually. Dieter says this in such a mean way, it makes me not like him, and he never talks about Heather again. Jean-Michel Trequinard is probably the most fun character of the game. There are several jokes with him, and I like his design. Bald head, huge medallion, and he spends all day at a restaurant instead of working. He's fun. Jean-Mi can't stand to hear Nancy's bad French, and he gives you free food. Maybe that's why I like him so much. Jean-Mi says Minette's biggest competitor is Hugo Butterly. You can call Hugo right when he's ordering a delivery of old smelly cheese. It sounds like Hugo is plotting a prank against Minette. Sadly, Hugo Butterly is another thing that gets dropped and is never mentioned again. JJ Ling is a plus-sized model. She looks good. I like her design, and I like her accent. I don't like her as a person. She starts by lying to you about the time her luggage was lost. JJ says she often lies to other people just to see if she can fool them. She says it's because she's a model and that's like acting. But no, JJ is a fitting model. She doesn't need to do acting for that. JJ's worst lie is claiming she's going to share cookies with you. Instead, she does the opposite and demands that you give her cookies. This is why Jean-Mi is a better character than JJ. He gives you food, JJ takes your food. JJ is a little too obsessed with playing hangman all the time, and she's paranoid about having her identity stolen. She says Dieter and Minette dated for 6 months until she dumped him. JJ also says he's got a giant snake in his studio. Dieter says the snake disappeared months ago, and that's it for the boa constrictor storyline. Kind of a weird thing to add to the game. In addition to the chores on the computer, you get chores from Minette inside the windmill. Minette is busy scribbling on a drawing board. She occasionally looks up when talking to you. It is rude of her not to look at Nancy the entire time. She wears a large mask and refuses to say why, which is flat out weird. I like Minette's design. Her hair always reminds me of a shiny bowling ball. She is a terrible boss, and yeah, a terrible person. It's no surprise that all her assistants quit. After quickly introducing herself to you, Minette orders you to make her some special tea. I think this is a fine puzzle. Most people seem to really hate it. The puzzle is to make tea with all the correct herbs. There are 15 possible herbs and 8 rules to follow. The rules are weird things, like if her favorite color is red, add herbs that grow in marshy areas. And if she picks an odd number between 1 and 10, add herbs ending in consonants. For some of the rules, you have to go back and forth between the descriptions of the herbs and the rule. So yeah, there's a fair amount of back and forth between the pages of the tea book. But if you go through each rule separately, which is what I do, it's not too hard to solve the puzzle. After you make the tea, Minette orders you to go to the park and buy stuff, which is similar to the items on her shelf. They're all round, that's what you're looking for. The 4 items you need to buy are the lava lamp, rings, a film canister, and a traffic cone. Minette gives you some money, just like Secret of the Old Clock. Nancy has a coin purse instead of a cell phone. I wish she had a cell phone, because phone calls in this game are a pain. You have to dial a 10-digit number to talk to Zoo or Hugo. To talk to one of Nancy's friends, you have to dial a 10-digit calling card number, then dial the number. It's dialing a 20-digit number. That's too much work for me. Sorry, Frank and Joe, I would love to talk to you, but that involves clicking the mouse 10 extra times. Forget that. The phone numbers are separated into groups of 2. I'm guessing that's how they do phone numbers in France. It's easy to follow, but it still throws me off a bit. When you leave Minette's for the first time, a threatening note is slipped under the door. Heather tells you to throw it in the dodo box. I like her line about how she'd let Nancy look at the letter. If you're a private detective or something. Nancy totally should have confessed the truth at that point. Buying things at the park is a fun challenge. You haggle over prices. The merchant gives you a price, and you get one chance to make a counteroffer. The counteroffer is always full price, 25% off, 50% off, 75% off, or €1. If your offer is too low, you have to pay full price. I like this challenge, even though I am terrible at it and always get stuck paying full price. The worst is when you have to pay full price for something over €100 because it takes way too long to earn the money. The only way to earn money is to do a painting challenge for the second merchant. You have to color in the Mona Lisa, and that's easy enough, but you only get €15 per painting. So that's over 6 paintings in a row to get something more than €100. I don't like that. I'd say it's a decent challenge, unless you have to do it over and over and over again, at which point it just becomes super tedious. And there's also a painting of flowers that you can do. A lot of the items for sale at the park are things from previous Nancy Drew games, which is cute. When you leave the park, the picture of the French Street has a poster for Cocoa Kringles and the Nancy Drew logo. That's also cute. The vendors are fully designed characters, although you can only see most of them from one specific angle. It is impressive they actually made designs for the vendors, instead of making them invisible people who hide behind desks. During your chore run, you get a phone call from a historian named Lynn Manrique. She wants to talk to Minette about the former owner of the windmill, a woman named Noisette Tornade. Even though that would take 5 minutes at most, Heather says it'll be at least 6 weeks before Minette can get back to her. Once you get all the items for Minette, she's distracted by a video game. Instead of working, she's just playing games online. That would be a great time to force Minette to talk to the historian. Just put Lynn through to Minette and deal with the consequences later. Since Minette is terrible at video games, Nancy decides to get a high score for her. It's on Nancy's computer, along with a fairly useless email application. The email has nothing of much interest, besides for a letter from Emily Griffin from Ghost Dogs and Moon Lake, and complaints from pizza delivery people. The computer connects to Jane's game portal, presumably made by Jane Pendleton from Curse of Blackmore Manor. It's nice to see she's making her own games, and some of them have cool names. A variation of Bull called Bull-Loney, Brady Bowl, where I imagine you have to bowl Brady Armstrong's head, Lulu's Loopy Lupine, which is probably the parrot becoming a werewolf, and Go to Seed, which is probably a variation of Mrs. Drake's Seedlings challenge. I would 100% like to play some of these fictional games. Like, who wouldn't want to do that instead of the Darkroom challenge? The only game that you can play is Model Match, which is the same as Petroglyph Punch, only you're matching pictures of people's heads instead of pictures of petroglyphs. The music is good. I like the music in this challenge. I like how the game constantly loops an animation of the dog winking at you that totally feels like something you'd see on a cheap gaming website. To log on to the game, you need the username and password from Sunny's notebook. It's Carol, the name for Minette's favorite form, and rude, which is the word Minette repeats a lot. She's so utterly rude. She says rude to mean cool. I can't tell if that's stylistic or just kind of dorky. When Nancy gets a high score, Minette thinks she did it and she goes back to work. She evaluates the things you bought. If you're missing one of the 4 items Minette needs, she sends you back to the park. You can resell the items to Monique for way less than you paid for them. Unfair. If you got all 4 things Minette wants, you don't get a chance to resell the extra items. Minette just throws them out automatically. That's also unfair. When you get Minette's stuff and finish the chore list, Prudence Rutherford calls. Prudence has a funny voice in this game. In Secret of the Scarlet Hand, she was more of a wealthy socialite. Here, she's talking in a full-blown falsetto and says silly things like, "Oh, goody goody gumdrops." Nancy has to finish Prudence's clothing designs. This is a puzzle which has too many instructions for my liking. There are several pages describing every single item of clothing, and the rules like prints don't count as a color. It's not too bad, but like the Darkroom puzzle, I would have simplified it to 1 page of rules. I believe there are 24 pieces of clothing to choose from, 4 each for the head, face, top, bottom, feet, and accessory. Following the rules, you have to make 3 different outfits. The first one is nice, mostly green and pink. The second one is flat out ridiculous. No one's gonna wear a bunny mask and ears to a cruise. Poor Prudence is gonna be laughed off the boat. The third one is better, although the blonde wig and matching mask look bad. Why does Minette design so many outfits with masks? They don't look good. And why is it that the famous fashion designer creates outfits which look terrible? When you finish the outfits, Minette demands to have JJ come in for a fitting. JJ isn't answering the phone, so Nancy is forced to go get her. JJ is a huge jerk at this part. She's almost as bad as Minette. She refuses to come to work. Too bad, I'm making cookies. Oh, you're going to be fired? Too bad, I don't care. I said too bad twice. Nancy promises to make JJ's cookies, and JJ dumps a bunch of extra requirements on her. First, Nancy's going to have to find a sprig of mint in the middle of a mint shortage. Second, she's going to have to find a substitute for brown sugar. And third, all the ingredients are in French. Have fun, Nancy! This challenge makes me dislike JJ in the same way the Darkroom challenge makes me dislike Dieter. To substitute for brown sugar, you're supposed to buy a recipe book in the park. The substitution requires molasses, which is in JJ's cupboard, along with books on electrical engineering. The engineering books seem kind of random to me. I know it's possible to talk to JJ about them, but that conversation option has never come up for me, and I've played this game at least 10 times. I also have trouble triggering the conversation about JJ's job. John Mee says JJ was tricked into her current contract with Minette. You can ask JJ what happened, but I don't remember ever seeing that conversation. The easy way to get mint is to visit John Mee and order ice cream. It costs €5, which is way cheaper than the €50 you have to pay at the park. Once you have the mint and the molasses, you can start the cooking challenge. It's the same basic cooking challenge as Secret of Shadow Ranch. All you do is follow the recipe, remembering to make the correct substitution for brown sugar. And like I said, the ingredients are in French, so that adds an extra layer of difficulty. You put all the items in the mixing bowl. If you get it wrong, you have to do it again. If you get it right, the cookies flatten and curl their edges up. They're magic cookies. Occasionally, Nancy will say it's getting late and she goes back to JJ's apartment to sleep. This comes with a scene that shows what day it is. I thought this was rather pointless. They easily could have had the entire game take place over the course of a single day. There's no real reason to introduce a time mechanic when it has zero effect on the game. I think the only thing that changes from day to day is the newspaper article in JJ's apartment. When you return to Minette's, Nancy gets a threatening phone call from the culprit. He insists on speaking to Minette. When Nancy says Minette is busy, he gets mad and hangs up. I don't think this scene worked well. It's supposed to be intimidating, but it comes across as a weird phone call because we don't know he's the culprit, and he directs all of his anger at Minette, not Nancy. It would have been scarier if he threatened Nancy or something, instead of just hanging up. That was the wrong answer. Hang up. Heather isn't in the office, so Nancy gets a chance to open the dodo box. This is the Coyote and Roadrunner puzzle from Secret of Shadow Ranch. The enemy pieces will follow your piece all around the board. You want to avoid them and or get them trapped in order to reach the exit square. You have to do this 3 times in a row. I guess it's an okay puzzle. I liked it better in Nancy Drew the Final Scene. The bee's knees was the bee's knees. The dodo box, well, it's kind of dead like dodos. This is one of 2 puzzles in the game that changes from junior mode to senior mode. I don't know why they added a junior mode variation for an optional puzzle, but okay. When you beat the puzzle, Nancy can read the threatening letters that were sent to Minette. One of them has a different font than the other 3. Heather left a note telling Nancy to buy a stuffed parrot for Minette. There are a lot of new items at the park, including a book on Ichido. The book is fun and comes with silly pictures. There's also a book on common ciphers. You're expected to get both these books in order to beat the game. The problem is that there's nothing to indicate these are items you have to get. They're hidden among a lot of random junk items. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players missed getting these important books. When you get the parrot, Minette is scared by cockroaches. She forces you to go into the studio and find all 9 of them. I did not like this challenge. It always seems to turn into random wandering around in hopes of finding the last 3 cockroaches. One of them leads to the computer, where Nancy sees Heather uses the odd font from the threatening letter. Another cockroach leads to the letter from Lin Manrique, talking about fabulous treasure that Noisette Tournade hid. Did I just hear there's a treasure hunt set up by someone who's now dead? Just like the last 4 Nancy Drew games? Okay! Let's forget about Minette and spend the second half of the game doing nothing but the treasure hunt. When you get all the cockroaches, Minette tells you to let them go at the park. Then she runs away scared. This is a funny scene, and a lot of the humor comes from the fact that Nancy and Minette are both acting odd. Nancy's being openly rude to her boss, and Minette is terrified instead of angry. That's not how either of them normally act. Nancy returns to the park. I think the game sends her to the park twice in a row to make sure players see Dieter. He's sitting on a bench. Nancy calls to him, and he leaves without saying hi. He drops a clock and Noisette's obituary. Nancy visits Dieter, who's hiding in the dark room. He says the clock belonged to his great-uncle Hans. It goes on the wall for a puzzle. I like this puzzle. It's the second puzzle, which is different in junior mode and senior mode. Your goal is to set all the clocks to 3. When you change the time on one clock, it usually changes the time on another clock. Appropriately enough, this is a time challenge. Solving the puzzle opens a hidden passageway leading to a safe with a hazelnut on it. The inscription says, "The year when our despair ended, the year when my despair began." That year is 1945, when World War II ended. 1945 opens the safe. Inside is Noisette's notebook, which has a transparent sheet and a code for her M380 decoder. This triggers a few puzzles, including the hazelnut. A magazine at JJ's mentions a guy named Zoo, who's an expert on the Paris Catacombs. Nancy calls him because maybe he's seen a hazelnut somewhere. That seems like a really random person to contact for help, but this is Nancy Drew, so it works. Zoo is a creepy guy who's obsessed with JJ. He wants a signed autograph from her, something that says, "Zoo, my love, Jing." JJ refuses to write this because she's too paranoid about her identity being stolen. Luckily, JJ is easily fooled. Nancy plays hangman with JJ and guesses all the letters in order. JJ doesn't notice she spelled out the message she just refused to write. I think in real life, most people would notice if they spelled out their own name. It's super convenient Zoo asked for a sentence with no repeating letters. If he had asked for her to sign it as JJ, I don't know what Nancy would have done. Nancy hides the fake autograph under a fake skull by the Catacombs. It costs money to go to that location. Couldn't Zoo have picked a drop-off location that's free? When Zoo gets the note, he says the hazelnut symbol is on a safe near the Mouton Beverage Company. Nancy will need a wetsuit, which she can get from a vendor. By coincidence, the vendor has an M380 device. He's willing to trade it for a bottle of Mouton Fouette from the 1960s. I don't know for sure if that's a bottle of wine, but I think it is. Nancy goes to the catacombs, and there's a brief puzzle where she has to avoid the tunnel police by dodging into a side passageway. I like that puzzle. The beverage company is very close by. Nancy has to navigate an underwater maze, which is another puzzle I like. It's very cool looking. Nancy needs to surface regularly, and it can be kind of tough finding a good place to surface before her air meter runs out. Nancy finds the bottle the vendor's looking for, along with the safe. The safe puzzle is tough because it requires you to look at the Metro map. Since the map is not in Nancy's inventory, you're forced to leave the catacombs in order to look at the map so you can solve the puzzle. I don't like that aspect of the puzzle. Just spend 5 minutes going away and then solve it. However, it is clever to use the Metro stop numbers for a puzzle. Hiding a secret puzzle on the map screen? Nice. Solving the puzzle gives you a model windmill. When you leave the area, Nancy changes out of her wetsuit back into her normal clothes. I wonder if that is the real reason Nancy lost her luggage in this game. They needed an excuse for Nancy to be wearing the same clothes every day. The rats will sometimes steal Nancy's inventory items, including the important Ichido book. Those mean rats! I'm pretty sure the rats won't steal anything you need in order to beat the game, but I've never tested that out. You can call Lynn Manrique and ask her about Noisette Tornade. She explains Noisette was romantically involved with a German soldier named Hans von Schwesterkrank. He left at the end of the war, and Paris turned on Noisette. That's your clue that the code to open the safe at Dieter's is 1945. Before Noisette died, she kept saying red, left, green. Learning this triggers the photo puzzle at Dieter's. Dieter wants you to take several stock photos for him, but the list is in French. Nancy doesn't know any French, and all of her bilingual friends refuse to translate for her for some reason. You're expected to buy a French dictionary at the park, or just look up the solution online. The pictures you need are the spider in Dieter's room, the cross at the park, the skull and candle at the catacombs, and the teapot and stapler at Minette's. Heather is back. You can confront her about the threatening letter she sent. Heather confesses that was when Minette dumped Dieter. Heather was so mad she wrote the letter to make Minette upset. Heather is mad that Dieter is still in love with Minette after all these months. It seems like he's never going to change his mind and date Heather instead. You can tell Minette that Heather wrote one of the threats. If you do, Heather is fired, and she gives Nancy a threatening phone call, which was way scarier than the threatening phone call with the culprit. If you don't tell Minette, Heather still works at Minette's, but she doesn't do much. Really, there's no reason to visit Minette's in the second half of the game, besides for getting the stock photos. The next time you visit Minette's, you get the paint bomb scene, which Heather isn't there for, and at the last time you visit Minette's, Heather's not there either. So getting rid of Heather honestly doesn't change much. She's gonna leave the office anyway. Once you get all the stock photos, Dieter leaves the dark room. He confesses he's related to Noisette's German boyfriend. He started dating Minette because he hoped to find Noisette's treasure, but he fell in love. Now Minette is all he can think about. Dieter is the only character who knows about Noisette's treasure. Like I said at the start of the review, it feels like the Minette storyline and the Noisette storyline are totally unconnected. None of the characters do anything related to Noisette's treasure because they don't know about it. From their perspective, Nancy is getting distracted by an irrelevant side quest that has nothing at all to do with Minette or the culprits. Dieter gives Nancy a paper from his great-uncle Hans. One side shows the 4 places Noisette hid something. That's a good clue. The other side has eyeball pictures. This matches with the transparent paper from Noisette's notebook. You select all the eyeballs that are green, are red, and left, following Noisette's final words. Selecting them gives Nancy the phrase, Sous Lorraine 4154. Nancy goes to the park and presses the numbers 4154 on the cross of Lorraine. This reveals a 3-part puzzle which creatively uses the scenery in the park. I like it. The first part is simple enough. You have to spin the crank on the mouths so they match the picture on the cross. This is kind of annoying. The mouths make annoying sounds. I can easily picture young kids setting the machine to annoy everyone all day long. It can be a bit tough to get the puzzle right because it's hard to tell if the lips are all the way shut or mostly shut. The next part is setting a spinning wheel to purple. Whenever you do that, a squirrel messes it up. I don't know why the squirrel hates the color purple so much, so the squirrel messes things up for you, and so do the rats. The animals in this game hate Nancy. To get rid of the squirrel, you have to buy a stake, a string, and a pie tin. You put them all in the dirt in that order. The banging pie tin scares the squirrel away. Part 3 is to turn on the fish at the water fountain. This reveals a hidden passageway. Nancy needs to buy a flashlight in order to enter. There's a long scene of Nancy walking through a tunnel. It reminds me of the walking scene from Danger on Deception Island. She's walking through an underground tunnel. I thought the scene in that game was too long, but this one is even longer. It is 30 seconds. Nancy finds a treasure chest with a key inside. Then she turns around and it's another 30-second walking scene. 2 long walking scenes back to back. I don't like it. Around this time, there's a paint bomb planted on Minette's door. You have to move the various circuits around so the circuits that directly connect to each other have a matching color or shape. It's a decent challenge. It would have worked to reuse this puzzle in another game, like The Deadly Device. The puzzle is a little tough, so maybe there should have been a junior mode version. Minette pesters you the entire time. What are you doing? I hear something! I thought that was annoying. And since when does Minette care about other people that much? If you don't finish the puzzle in time, Minette barges into the room and sets off the bomb. I wonder what the culprits were thinking with this bomb. At the end of the game, they say their threats were intended to motivate Minette in order to work faster. With the bomb, it seems like that would only slow Minette down, because now she has to spend a lot of time cleaning up. Not to mention, Minette can't see the bomb. She's on the wrong side of the door. If you want to scare her into working faster, this is a bad way to do it. The last puzzle is getting M380 dials. There are large dials in Minette's studio, but they're covered in paint. A nearby magazine has a picture of Minette posing with the dials. Nancy complains the photograph is cropped, which always struck me as a weird complaint, because it's covered up by a second picture. Like, the cropping is not the problem, Nancy. If the picture was uncropped, you still wouldn't be able to see it. Nancy asks Jean-Mi for the full picture. He forces you to make parfaits for Henri, the waiter. I like the parfait challenge. It's fun, easy to figure out, and the food looks delicious. Thanks to this game, I always want to get a parfait for dessert, if I'm at a place that serves parfaits. The color scheme for the challenge is good. There are a lot of bright and cheery colors. It's fun seeing the various names and designs for the different parfaits. I would say this is a better challenge than the tea challenge and the cookie challenge. We have 3 different cooking challenges in this game. That's a little odd. Maybe we should call it Nancy Drew Cooking by Design. Jean-Mi's picture shows the dials should be set to 953. You set the dials to those numbers, then you type the message in Noisette's notebook. The screen shows the typewriter keyboard at this point, which confused some players, because it looks like you're supposed to click on the keyboard keys, just like you click on the phone buttons to dial a phone number. You're not supposed to click, though. You're supposed to type on the keyboard, like Nancy says. Solving the challenge gives you a list of colors. The windmill's empty now. Go to the center of the windmill. You put the miniature windmill in place for a colors puzzle. You move each row left and right until you have the colors correct. Easy puzzle. This gives you a brief scene of the outside of the windmill. It moves around and opens a hidden passageway. I like this scene. It gives players a sense of accomplishment. It makes you feel like something big is happening. You know you're walking into the endgame challenge. In the secret passageway is a locked door. You open it with a key from the park to find all the stained glass artwork. Nancy reads a long, somewhat sad letter by Noisette, which talks about all the trouble she went through after the war. Like I said earlier, it's inconsistent for Nancy to not know any French for the entire game, only to magically become fluent in French here. It would have made more sense if this letter had been written in English, like the notes in Noisette's notebook. A gate drops from the ceiling, blocking the exit. It says, "One last puzzle for you, my dear friend." You're supposed to run that phrase through the date shift cipher from the Book of Ciphers, with the numbers 380. So as you move first letter 3 ahead, second letter 8 ahead, third letter 0 ahead, you repeat that pattern for every group of 3 letters. That gives you the phrase, which you type into the M380. This is a confusing puzzle, especially if you never got the book on ciphers. Nancy's notebook explains the puzzle in some detail, which helps a lot. Oh, and you want to set the dials to 1043, which was written at the bottom of Noisette's letter. I was able to figure that part out on my own. The rest of the puzzle? Total confusion. It's definitely a puzzle you have to work out on a piece of paper, or look up the solution on the internet. The solution's 2157. Nancy goes back to Minette's, where she overhears Minette talking to the culprits. It's disappointing that Nancy figures out who the culprit is by complete accident. She wasn't trying to catch the culprits, she just walked in on them unexpectedly. It's also disappointing that the culprits are people who we've never heard of before. Ernst and Gunther Schmeck are mentioned in one of the newspapers in JJ's area, and that's it. That's the only time they get referenced before they're revealed as the culprits. I was definitely confused at this point because I had no idea who these guys are. Also, we never get to see what they look like. We only hear them. So the culprit revelation was a letdown. I think of Minette as the main culprit of the game, not the Schmecks. Minette isn't the one in charge, but she's the character that players actually know. I think the same thing would happen if Secrets Can Kill had a similar ending. If the culprits in that game were Mitch Dillon and Hulk, everyone would think of Hulk as the culprit more so than Mitch, because Mitch is a random guy we've never heard of before. The Schmecks and Minette explain that the First Lady's dress is a giant bugging device. They'll use it to overhear everything spoken within 10 meters of the First Lady. For whatever reason, they expect to hear people say a lot of government secrets within earshot of the First Lady at a world summit. Like, United States and England are going to have a bragging contest about who has the most state secrets in order to impress France. The culprits leave. Sadly, Nancy isn't smart enough to wait a few minutes to make sure they're really gone. So when Nancy leaves the hidden passageway, she's caught by Minette. I like the scene of Minette confronting Nancy. She gets shown from different angles which haven't been seen before, and there's an extreme close-up of Minette's mask. I like how these games usually have unique animations for the culprit reveal. That is way better than the final scene, where the culprit stands in place in the same pose they always stand in. There's an Ichido challenge. Minette has 9 possible attacks. She makes a specific noise indicating where she's going to attack. You want to move your mouse there to block her. I've never been able to memorize the noises. I always make my choices based on her movements. If you block an attack, her health meter at the top goes down. If she lands an attack, your health meter at the bottom goes down. This is a long challenge. It took me 3 minutes the last time I played. I think it's long on purpose to help out players who didn't get the Ichido book. I definitely would have given this challenge an easier junior mode variation. I don't like this endgame challenge much, but it works okay. Nancy and Minette talk to each other the whole time, and their dialogue was pretty terrible. I've fought imaginary elves that are stronger than you. You've got a twin, and I used to think twins were so cute. If their trash talk was actually good, I'd probably like this challenge better. Since a challenge is so long, you're pretty likely to hear them repeat lines, especially if you lose and have to try again. When Minette is defeated, she complains Nancy beat her without throwing a single punch. I like that. We finish the game with a big fight scene, and Nancy still gets credit for never fighting people. Minette collapses and her mask comes off. There's a slow pan to show Minette's big secret, a silly alien tattoo on her cheek. Honestly, that was probably a better surprise than Minette being the culprit. I love it. I'm glad we finally got to see her face. It would be a bummer if we never got to see what she looks like. The ending doesn't mention Dieter, Jean-Mi, or JJ, so over half the characters get no resolution at all. What happened next to JJ? Did she give up modeling to become an electrical engineer? Did Dieter end up dating Heather? Did Jean-Mi ever order a parfait? We never find out! Most of the ending explains the culprit's plot and how people reacted to Noisette's treasure. Then there's the spring fashion show. If Heather isn't fired, she hires Nancy to be a model in a strange outfit. If Heather is fired, Nancy doesn't go to the show. This is the first game of the series with multiple endings. I think multiple endings is a good idea, but both endings are mostly the same. All they did was change one or two lines. I think it would have been better if the endings were very different, or if we got 5 endings, one for each character. So that's it for Danger by Design. It's not a bad game. There are plenty of things to like about it. My favorites are the parfaits, the catacombs, and pretty much everything in the park. I'm still not a fan. It felt like we had a decent mystery going on with Minette, but then Nancy is distracted by the Noisette treasure hunt. She spends half the game trying to find the treasure, and it has no effect on the story at all. It's like they shoehorned a treasure hunt into a pre-existing game, which didn't need one. The culprits are 2 random guys we don't know, and half the characters don't appear in the ending. I think if the second half of the game had matched the first half, I would have liked it far better. I think of this game as on par with Secret of the Scarlet Hand. I like that game slightly better than this one. The culprit is way better in that game. Since I gave Scarlet Hand a 7.5, I give Nancy Drew Danger by Design a 7 out of 10.